Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
When you want to have fun and have scratchers to scratch, there's a playful way you can do just that. Scratch with the key or acrylic nail. Scratch with the quill from a porcupine tail. Use a belt buckle from your friend Lamar. Or scratch with your pick while you play guitar. You can scratch in a bunch of different playful ways. Scratchers from the California Lottery. A little play can make your day. Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase, play, or claim.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
New activation and upfront payment for 3-month plan required. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for full terms.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
Listeners, we're so excited this week because our guest is 2-time Hugo Award finalist Chuck Tingle. Chuck is a mysterious force of energy behind sunglasses and a pink mask and the anonymous author of romance, horror, and fantasy. Chuck writes to prove love is real because love is the most important tool we have when resisting the endless cosmic void. Amen. His latest novel, the queer horror Camp Damascus, is out the day after this recording drops. Chuck, welcome to the show. We are so stoked to have you.
Wow, thank you for inviting me. I am thrilled for a number of reasons. One is that I could talk about art all day. If you want to get me just riled up and put a microphone in front, I'm going to go for 5 hours just about picking apart some piece of media that I enjoy. And then number two is I've talked about this a lot in interviews. I think it's probably controversial for an author, but look at me. I got a dang pink bag over my head right now. It doesn't. Sure do. I don't shy away from being unique or different in my approach. And for an author, I actually artistically draw a lot less from books and a lot more from film in my writing. I write all the time, and I read very little. I think as a buckaroo on the autism spectrum, part of my hyper focus, it helps me write. I can write thousands of words a day.
So that's why you're so prolific.
that actually really is, yes. And so I can just I can just take off like a rocket ship on writing. And whenever I start to read, I can get about a half a page before my mind starts to think about writing, actually, my own stories, I start analyzing it. And so, like I said, I think that's part of my autistic way. And so when I want to receive a story through some kind of medium, film is really my choice. And I also write, I think, in a cinematic style. My pacing and my plotting is very film-based. And like I said, I think as an author, especially an adult author, you're not supposed to say that.
Right.
I do not care. I don't care at all. We're out here being dang punk rockers, and it doesn't matter to me. Now I say any medium works. So yeah. Anyway, I'm so excited.
Well, we're incredibly excited. When I got the notification that you were interested in coming on, I was excited. I was like shouting over the phone to Mary Beth about it. But the reason why we're here is your new horror novel, Camp Damascus. Can you tell listeners a little bit about it? As I said offline, I'm only about halfway through, and I'm not sure how far Mary Beth is. So not as many spoilers, because this is coming out before the episode or before the book drops. But what is this book about?
Yes. Okay. Well, it is a bit of a mystery in the sense of information is unraveled slowly. And I think part of the stake of the book and what makes it entertaining is the amount of times I think readers will kind of flip-flop back and forth about maybe what they think is going on. So I'm trying to be very careful about spoilers, but I will say, in a basic sense, it is about a queer conversion therapy camp trying to pray the gay away, and they have 100% success rate. There is a town in Montana that is essentially their economy is built around this camp. And the lead character, Rose, is autistic, and also, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, also queer, although at the beginning of the story, that is kind of part of the mystery of exploring why her feelings are the way that they are. And kind of Rose unraveling what it is that makes this camp have 100% success rate and kind of the dark secret behind that.
Yeah. So when I was reading like the plot synopsis on Amazon, it didn't really give anything away. And so it was really kind of cool to dive into this book and just sort of experience it as it's like unfolding. And so my first surprise was I didn't know the gender of the protagonist until I started reading, and then I realized it was Rose. And I guess it's because like I'm particularly used to seeing a lot of the kind of gay male erotica that you've written in the past. And so what drew you to writing this story, first focusing on a young queer woman and also about the idea of queer conversion camps?
Yes. Well, I started out when I started writing Tinglers. I mean, I guess for listeners that don't know, Tinglers are short erotica stories. Usually, I would say I shy away from saying strange or weird, because to me they are just, I would say, joyful and maybe I would say unique partners of Bigfoot or a living concept or something kind of a magical
Mothman erotica. I'm a Mothman freak, so I love the Mothman erotica is very much in my wheelhouse of content.
As a side note, Mothman, I always knew Mothman was handsome, but dang, do those Tinglers resonate with the buckaroos. I did not expect them to quite take off as much as they did. So yeah, there's a lot of
Mothman's a boy.
moth heads out there. Moth heads rise up, I guess. But yes, so that is a Tingle. And when I started, they were gay, queer, only kind of a buckaroo on buckaroo. And I think part of why I did that was because I wanted them to be unabashedly queer. Just you look at it, and also I was just kind of exploring parts of myself that I didn't quite understand yet. There's also a lot of, I think that as well, when I come up with these ideas, I was kind of shaping political statements and these things. And personally, I think that women get sexualized in the media, celebrities, politicians, these things, more than I think needs to be done. I think that's going to happen anyway. I kind of didn't want to contribute to that.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'm going to write about mostly buckaroos and not ladybucks because, there's a big difference whether they're a conservative that needs to be taken down a peg or not between me writing about a male politician getting pounded in this way or a ladybug politician this way. And I said, I just don't want to contribute to that. It just didn't feel. And so I still will not. There are two rules for Tinglers. I don't write about ladybug celebrities, real ones. I write lesbian Tinglers all the time, but I just don't. If others want to do that artistically, whatever, I understand. It's just not for me. And then two, I don't write about personifications of things like natural disasters or things where people are hurt or injured. In reality, I just don't want to contribute to those things when there's death or something like that involved. That's why I didn't, when COVID was happening, everyone said, Chuck, you should write COVID Tingler. And so I didn't do that, but I wrote Tinglers about washing your hands or social distancing or these different ways. But personifying COVID itself as a sort of hero, I thought I did not like the ethics of that. So those are kind of my rules. And when I started out, I was just exploring these different feelings. And eventually it was a habit. I was just writing and I said, oh, I like this, I like this one. And then eventually I started reaching out to the buckaroos in the community and saying, I would really like the Tingleverse to be a place for everyone. I want all to be welcome across the queer spectrum. I mean, all are welcome regardless, but if I'm going to be writing these queer books, let's bring some others in. So I started writing bisexual Tinglers, which is where I am on the sexuality spectrum, trans Tinglers, ladybug on ladybug Tinglers, asexual Tinglers, I'm non-binary Tinglers. So now I'm really making an effort to spread that out. To answer your question about Rose, I will say personally, I have I've talked about this a little bit, but I find my own gender identity something that I think I will continue exploring. I think that I resonate with femininity much, much more. There's a thing called the button question, where it's if you were to push a button and change into whatever body you want, would it be male or female, non-binary? What would you pick? And as myself, who has always been a he, him pronoun user, I would push the button and change into a female body because I feel like that kind of matches the most. The thing is that it doesn't have that pull deep in me. The buckaroos talk about dysphoria. I don't have that. There's no part of me that thinks about it every day. It's more like it's just a logical fact. It's just it's just the truth. It's what I would do. If I had the button, I would push it. Yeah. So that is something interesting. I would call it maybe non-dysphoric trans has been used.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but so that is something that I don't talk about it too much because it is just it still flies around in my daily brain.
Gender is so fucking weird, isn't it? Like the most fucking weird thing. Like I know people say it's not important, but it is really important to a lot of people in trying to understand. And it is such like putting your head around gender is just such like a wild, fluid experience that I wish more people understood, like how that experience is incredibly fluid. And it's cool to hear you talk about that because I think it does show like gender identity is so unique for every person and it is very fluid. And that's just the way we should think about it. Like, it shouldn't be that difficult to understand that.
And I think what is so interesting about my relationship with it, to a point you made, it is so important to so many buckaroos. And yet to me, I am in a strange position because it is not important at all to me. It is it just kind of is. I don't think about it. So that's why it's so interesting for me to explore is when I was trotting around with some buds and they were all, a bunch of guys, and they were they're saying, oh, who's got the dang perfect body? If you could have any body, who would it be? They're throwing a dang Brad Pitt and dang Fight Club and all these different things. And then when it was my turn, I said, oh, well, maybe like a dang Brie Larson. And everybody kind of looked at Chuck and they were like, what the heck are you talking about? And I said, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that was off the table. That's just what my thought was. And so I kind of have a relationship with it like that, where it does not bring me up or down. It's rare. Yeah. It's never part of my day. It is just kind of like that's just the truth of it. And who knows? I mean, maybe that will someday be a big part of my life. But for the moment, it just kind of is what it is for me. And that's so awesome. It's interesting to explore. Anyway, that is the most rambling answer to your dang question.
I loved it, though. I think more people need to talk about that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Rose maybe. I mean, the short answer is that I wrote a novella called Straight, and it had a male protagonist. So maybe I just wanted to switch it for the next one. Or maybe there is a subconscious thing where I knew that Rose, because Rose is autistic like I am, there's a lot of personal stuff in Rose. So maybe I wanted Rose to be a woman. And I don't really know. It's an interesting thing to think about. I would say that I personally, I try to kind of change that just because I think diversity is interesting of who your first person present speaker is. So I kind of try to just maybe alternate the different books, just different ways and do that. But I personally prefer to write from a woman's perspective. Okay. If I were just, I could write whatever I wanted. I would like that kind of, I guess in the same way of the button question, buckaroos can ask them, if you're playing the dang video game, which old Chuck used to, I would always pick the dang ladybug character.
So would I.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
You're a young buckaroo, and all the friends are saying, why the heck are you dang Princess Peach? And you say, well, Princess Peach is clearly the best. What the heck are you talking about?
She is clearly the best.
Obviously she is.
She could
best,
float.
though.
In Super Mario Brothers 2, she could float, and she made that game so much more fun.
Yes. I've always been drawn to that.
Yeah.
So what was the experience like for you writing like a full-length horror novel versus these Tinglers that are shorter, they're very specific, and they're erotica, and you're really shifting gears to something very different than people have seen from you. But then what was that like writing it? Did it feel super different? Or it sounds like you write a lot. So like, what was that kind of process like to shift gears so differently from what you're used to writing?
Yes. Well, there's two big differences. One is Tinglers are really used to, in almost real time, comment on a political situation, my thoughts about something. So
okay.
I think that just the speed of that, I wrote Camp Damascus. I mean, this is going to be coming out about 2 years after it was written. And so part of me was thinking, well, is this going to resonate the way it did? But I found, especially with queer issues, the devils who we are battling against are just so dang ridiculous. And a lot of what they do is a cycle. So if you look at the way, for instance, this is kind of unrelated, but go back to our first question. If you look at the way that trans buckaroos are spoken about by conservative devils, it is cut and paste the way they talked about gay buckaroos 30 years ago. It looks like a dang Mad Libs that they just filled in. So a lot of these issues,
it does.
I'm still. Even though I wrote Camp Damascus 2 years ago, it's still all these issues still apply because it's just the same cycle that they use over and over again. And these are systematic problems. So that was the big one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I know that you've addressed a lot of that stuff in the Tingler. So it's got to be great to kind of write even further into that. And also really fucking sad that those topics are even more relevant now than they were 2 years ago. Like it's just awful. But I'm glad you're writing about queer conversion camps because people hear about them and we had they/them and we don't need to talk about that movie, but I'm excited that you're you're tackling that, and especially from an autistic queer perspective, is just like, you know, it's a perspective that we don't have in the horror genre in any kind of media, and it's great that we're we're getting that. And
yes, thank you for pointing that out. There is queer horror, and there is great queer horror, and I'm sure there is neurodivergent. I don't want to give myself too much credit, but I feel like writing a sort of autistic horror novel, I just personally don't know where I have really seen that before, especially
I have one for you. I have one for you if you want one. So
because I don't know.
Andrew Joseph White, have you ever heard of him? So Andrew Joseph White is a trans autistic writer. His first book, Hell Followed With Us, is this like incredible post-apocalyptic, biblically accurate angel queer autistic book. And his new book, The Spirit Bears Its Teeth, has an autistic trans protagonist. And he is one of the few that I have found that's writing about that stuff. And he's pretty new. So I would definitely recommend. And his stuff right now is technically considered young adult, but it's really gross. So like it's incredibly well written. So if you're looking for another autistic horror writer who's also writing queer trans characters, please check out his stuff. It's real good.
It is amazing. And I saw a review of Camp Damascus, I think maybe yesterday, that compared it to, you said Hell Follows With Us?
Yeah.
Is that compared it to that book, and I thought, oh, I've never heard of this book. I should check it out. So what an interesting convergence of dialogue.
Confluence, yeah.
That's great.
What I really enjoyed, because this is written from Rose's perspective, so it was interesting to get into her head and see the sort of hyperfixation that she has, and kind of, you know, I think books can be any art can be very empathetic. And so what I love about this is being able to spend some time in her head and see the world from her perspective. And I think, I don't know, I feel like if more people were able to put themselves into different shoes, that, you know, maybe love would win. I guess I really enjoy the fact that this is a completely different protagonist than I'm used to seeing in horror, and seeing their perspectives so clearly.
Wow, thank you. Yes, I mean, empathy is, that's what on the path to love, creating empathy. What a dang tool! Thank you for saying that. I very much, I very much enjoyed writing Rose. That's very kind. Thank you.
Of course. So let's take it back though. How did you get introduced to the horror genre?
Okay, well, I have always loved horror. I have always loved in my own art. I call it maligned trinity of genre: horror, comedy, and erotica, or romance, which are just genres that I think are kind of looked down upon as being lower class, if that makes sense. They don't get the awards. They are not seen as serious, even though a lot of those are making the most money, funny enough. So it shows that, that the sort of intelligentsia saying, you can't like those if you want to be serious about art.
Okay, really quick to jump into that, erotica and romance. I used to be an asshole about that. Those, you know this, romance writers make like the amount of books that romance writers write, and people devour them. And I mean, like, and also I think it's also got to do a little bit with gender, because like, oh, that's a woman's book, like that's not important. And
they
I
make
just
so
like
much money.
They do.
It is huge.
It's huge. When I used to work in a library, romance, always books coming out of the romance section. And I think an erotica, and I just think it's so maligned for what it is, but it shouldn't be, because it's a moneymaker. People love that shit. And it's, yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to jump in about how important erotica and romance novels are, and how they're just as disregarded as like, oh, those are women's books. And it's like, well, fuck you.
Yes. And I think that the reason, first of all, you are right about the women's book thing. That's a huge issue with that. The thing that I identify and kind of resonate with in that is that I think that they are reactions of the body, and that the body is always seen as kind of primal and not higher thought.
Yeah.
So horror, you have fear and you scream. Comedy, you laugh. and erotic and romance, you are aroused. So these are these things that you kind of can't help with your brain. They are instinct. They are animalistic. And so those are kind of seen as not serious. To me, artistically, I think that's what all the dang fun is. That's so honest and raw, which is something that I really love to kind of get to the bottom of, is how honest and just real can we make something. So for me, I love exploring that place. And I think horror and erotica, that's kind of artistically why I started to create it, was I just liked exploring the honesty there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember the first horror, like, how did you get introduced to horror? Like, was it movies? Was there a movie you watched for the first time that like really stuck with you or something? Like, can you kind of tell us how you got introduced to the genre as a kid?
I talked about this the other day, even before anything actually scary. I was always, I think the example I gave was, if there are a bunch of lunchboxes, I'm picking the one with the werewolf on it. Even if it's a silly werewolf, that's the one and I don't really know why. I just, even the non-scary versions of the scary things, that was always, I guess, maybe there is something about it, the other, or it being monstrous.
The other.
Is maybe interesting. So before I was ever scared of anything, I just drawn to it, So there's that, and then the first movie that I remember seeing was on television, Night of the Living Dead. I had seen it.
Oh wow!
I had seen scary things before, but it was one of those late night. It comes on, and then just dang, and I think what I liked about it was, and by the way, this is the remake. So
okay.
And it's I think George Romero also did the remake, but nobody seems to like it. I like the remake better personally, but there was just something. Yeah, well, it's a personal thing, probably because that's the one I saw. But I just remember, I just remember thinking, wow, I like that they're all holed up in this house, and I like, there was something about it where I thought, I really like staying here with these people, and there's something scary outside, and I like seeing what we're gonna do to keep us safe. And there was honestly, I would say, something cozy about it, even though it was scary, and I just really like that feeling, and it's a really kind of a strange thing to think about.
It is, but I think a lot of horror fans have that, where it's like, it's this thing that you feel like, ooh, I'm home, but at the same time, this is scaring me, but also maybe I can overcome it and I'll be changed for it. And so like there's that kind of push and pull between like the grotesque and the cozy. Because I do find a lot of times when people ask what like my comfort film is or something like that, I will just list a horror movie that I go to and I rewatch constantly. Yes. And people are like, that's your comfort film? But I think it's because for a lot of fans of the genre, it becomes nostalgic. It becomes like that kind of first time that you saw something that was different than reality in a lot of ways. And I don't know. I love that. I love that about it.
So Chuck, were you a scared kid? Were you easily scared by horror movies or horror media or any scary things that you consumed?
I was horrified of everything. And then something switched. I don't know what it is. And I would say in my past, a lot of, I keep a lot of myself a mystery. And so I tell stories. I talk about family life or other things. But I would say that it is a way of metafiction or meta truth, depending on how you look at it, which is the example I give is if I post online that I pet a dog today, I might have pet a cat. But something did happen. So that is what I used to kind of protect my privacy. So I have to be careful about the things that I say sometimes. But I will say, as a truthful nugget, at a certain point in the dang pretty early teenage years, I left where I was originally from and basically trotted all over the dang country in a way reminiscent of, Jack Kerouac or something, hitching rides, no home, living out of a dang suitcase. And I did that for probably a decade and a half before landing in Billings. Most of my life was spent kind of trotting around. So I think that during that time, something happened where I was just not afraid anymore and went to the total opposite where I can't remember the last time I was scared. It's been maybe decades. I don't know. I do not feel that anymore. Every once in a while, you'll watch a real good horror movie that actually scares you. I feel like that's everything 3 years or something. I don't know. I don't get scared anymore, and I don't know why.
Well, what are some that have scared you like that then? Like recent ones, especially. Like when was the last time you felt that close feeling?
I feel like that's really hard to answer because my first instinct is none, and then I think there's a bunch that I really liked, and there's so many new horror movies that I loved. I just don't know if they scared me. I don't know if I'm different from most horror fans, but I don't need a horror movie to scare me. I don't. No. It's not really part of it for me. I love them without getting scared.
Yeah.
I vaguely feel like I got scared in Barbarian, but I think that might just be that I liked it so much, and my memory of it is more that I just loved that movie and less that I was scared by it. I really can't think of the last time I was scared, actually.
Wow. Yeah, I know what you mean, though. It's like scared is a weird word sometimes with horror because, like, I was affected by it, not necessarily terrified, but I was like emotionally affected by it, and I'm looking for like that emotional reaction, and whether that's fear or I loved it, that kind of thing. So, like, what other films have you had like maybe more like emotional reactions to, like deep kind of emotional reactions to recently? Besides Barbarian?
Okay. Yes. Gosh, recently, I'm trying to think of what.
So I always ask these questions about like recent things, and I forget every movie I've ever seen. So I just did it right back to you. I'm so sorry.
No, I want to have a good. Yeah, I'm sure it's the same. I think part of it too is I watch so many horror movies, and that I see everything that comes out. So part of me is it's just a giant. It's a big blur.
It's like a blur. Yeah.
I know how you feel.
Yes. It just all moves together within me. Oh, I mean, I will say this. My writing is very inspired by films of Jordan Peele, actually. Really helped me crack the code on how I wanted to present what I was doing and kind of the beats that I wanted to use. And he is a huge influence for me for writing. And I think that every one of his films, including Nope, which is kind of, I would say barely horror. I loved it, but it is. Okay. I feel like it's more like a dark sci-fi. Mm-hmm. But Us and Get Out gave me that sort of. There is a visceral feeling that I got from those. And actually, I got it from Nope too. When I say I'm definitely not disparaging Nope at all.
Yeah, no, of course. It's just very different from the other stuff he's done in such an interesting, awesome way.
Yeah, I think it's intentionally not as horror, to be honest. It is, well, you know what it is? It is still horror, but it's horror in the way that it's a summer blockbuster horror. In the same way that Jaws, Jaws is horror. But at this point, I think if you were to show Jaws to someone that didn't know anything about it, they would say, oh, well, that's like an animal attack movie or so. There's just a different feeling, but although it is technically horror, So yes, I think that his movies really, really give me that feeling. I think what I look for in horror too, and my favorite horror, to go back to the feeling thing, is I look at horror in kind of two versions.
Okay.
I call it grueling horror and cathartic horror, although both I think are technically cathartic. It's just, where does the catharsis come? So the first one, grueling horror, is kind of the most punk rock version, where it is, I'm going to put myself through this experience, and usually they have bad endings, and it's how extreme, how big is the roller coaster, how many loops does it have, and then when you get to the other side, you're exhausted, and it's kind of fourth wall breaking, where something really bad happened to these characters, but I myself have survived, and then you kind of get catharsis as the viewer or the reader from that. And then the second version, which is cathartic horror, is instead of you feeling that at the end when it's kind of over with and you go about your day and you're still alive the next day, cathartic horror, at the third act or maybe the midpoint, the characters kind of turn the tables and you get this sort of revenge is kind of a version of what it is, but the lead character comes back and you're feeling these emotions of catharsis as they escape and kill everybody and go nuts.
That rush.
And I feel like a lot of what horror is the balance of the audience not knowing which one you're going to get. And that's kind of the excitement, as you go in and you kind of have this push and pull. And that, so for me, my preference is the second one of that cathartic horror. And I think actually Jordan Peele is actually kind of a master of that. I think he does cathartic horror very, very well.
Hell yeah.
I agree. It's there's a lot of empathy in his work. So I do feel that there is like that catharsis at the end that, I hadn't even really thought about that.
Think about the end. Think about Get Out and why that resonated like it did. I don't want to spoil it. I guess it's been out for probably a decade now, but is that true? I just threw that out. It's got to be so.
I don't think it's been a decade, but we're getting pretty close. I think we're getting.
It's 2017, so we're definitely 6 years out.
Well, dang it! First of all, good for him. He puts out movies fast. That's great, because to think of that as his old movie, it's only been 6 years, but
I know it's wild.
That's weird. I actually didn't even think about it at that time, like in that time frame. Like, oh my God, wow, he really has made 3 really incredible movies in 6 years. Like, that's actually very impressive. Thanks for changing the horror landscape in 6 years, Jordan Peele.
Incredible.
Jesus.
And that ending of the catharsis of escaping when the police lights flash at the end.
And then it could have gone so different.
And I've seen that they shot both endings. And I honestly feel like if you follow those timelines of the ending where that is an actual police car and it's a bad ending, that changes so much. I think that changes Jordan Peele's career. I think it changes the landscape of horror. It changes my own writing, to be honest. It is really hard to understate how much he has influenced Chuck in so many ways.
Hell yeah.
That's so cool.
When you pick up some scratches, cause you want a fun break, the playful way you scratch is the next choice you should make. You can make your dog's leg kick and scratch with that. You could even grab a laser pointer and use your cat. You can build yourself a homemade scratching machine or use a piece from your chess set. Go ahead, grab the queen. Scratch like a DJ with your record player. A cactus could scratch off that scratchable layer. Cause when it comes to scratching, there's a million playful ways. Thanks to scratchers from the California Lottery, a little play can make your day.
Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase, play, or claim.
Selling your car to Carvana is as easy as...
As easy as pie?
Sure. All you have to do is enter your license plate or VIN.
As easy as a stroll in the park.
Okay, then just answer a few questions and you'll get a real offer in seconds.
As easy as singing.
Why not? Schedule a pickup or drop off and Carvana will pay you that amount right on the spot.
As easy as playing guitar.
Actually, I find that kind of difficult. But selling your car to Carvana is as easy as...
Can be.
Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get an instant offer today.
All right. Well, we've talked a lot about your history and your work, but Chuck, what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
Wow. I brought a real classic, and in rewatching it, I realized, well, first of all, it just blew my mind. I didn't even think of the Jordan Peele connection, because we have to talk about the classic sketch. Listeners might get tipped off by what I'm talking about, because Key and Peele do a sketch about this movie. But I picked Gremlins 2.
Hell yeah. All right. So in Gremlins 2, the Gremlins are back, and this time they've taken control of a New York City media mogul's high-tech skyscraper. Short, simple, to the fucking point, obsessed.
To the point.
Chuck, tell us, why is this your Scarred for Life pick? How old were you when you saw this? Paint us the picture of why this terrified you and how it terrified you.
So here's the thing. I don't know how old I was, mostly because I've seen it so many dang times. Also because I do like to obscure my real age in some ways.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
But I can also say this. It came out in 1990. This and the first Gremlins, I watched so many times that I really do not have the recollection of the first one. I do have a recollection of seeing the VHS at the store, because the cover art of Gremlins 2, well, both the Gremlins VHS cover art, beautiful. I especially like the Gremlins 2 one. That kind of hyper-realistic painted style that was on a lot
and with the cigar, it's just like the most perfect,
it's so perfect
fucking cover.
Yes, putting out ashes in the drawer, and Gizmo is in the drawer hiding out.
And poor Gizmo's there.
That era of covers was just amazing. And I will say, maybe this goes back to what were you talking about just kind of liking scary things. I realized upon rewatching, because I rewatched before I came on here, that there's one part that scared me in both Gremlins movies, and everything else, for being a very frightened young buckaroo, not only did not scare me, I just thought it was so cool and also so normal. Upon rewatching, to bring it back to that Key and Peele sketch where they talk about how bizarre Gremlins 2 is, it seemed completely made perfect sense to me. Nothing about it was all that far-fetched. And now I wonder if that being such a favorite movie of a young Chuck is kind of focused my sensibilities, and why I don't think anything is that unusual about my Tinglers. I thought maybe my dang, because I understand that buckaroos think Tinglers are very funny and outrageous, and I can lean into that. But personally, most of the time I'm thinking in my head, well, that's not that outrageous. It's just, and I wonder sometimes, well, at least once when I rewatched Gremlins 2, I thought, does this all come back to Gremlins 2 and me thinking that this was just a normal movie?
Thank you, Gremlins 2. Gremlins 2 is why we have Chuck Tingle, everybody. It's the end of the podcast. Have a great day. I'm just
It could be.
I love that. Well, what you're saying, though, makes perfect sense, because on a rewatch, like, you just have to accept that all of this is real, that all this is possible, that there are gremlins that can drink DNA and change into various other forms of themselves. Like, it's just... You have to accept a whole lot going into this. The movie wants you to follow by its logic as opposed to the world's logic. And I think I love that about it. And I think that's probably why it resonates with kids in particular, because it's like you sit down and you watch this and the wildest stuff is happening on screen that in real world you say, oh, it can't happen. But while you're sitting there and while you're watching this movie, I think the movie is so masterful in that it kind of takes you there and says, hey, come with me and I'm going to show you something really wild and we're going to have a lot of fun for almost 2 hours.
Like, not enough. I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, just thinking about like what horror is right now and what horror people want from horror. And I think Gremlins 2 is an indicator of like when horror was really fun. And I also know that like the production, like Joe Dante made this crazy because he didn't want to make Gremlins 2 and he wanted to make something so ridiculously batshit that they would never ask him to do it again. But it's also like so fun and weird and like, you know, sure, it's kind of outlandish and dumb, but it's also so fun. And I think that's what a lot of horror movies are missing now. And I think there's obviously a place for very serious horror, and I love that. But I also think we need to make room for fun, weird, campy, ridiculous horror, because I think that is part of what horror is. And I think being able to have fun with it and just be like, this is so fucking ridiculous, but I love every second of it. Like, yeah, that fucking thing just sprouted wings. Yeah, Christopher Lee's watching Gizmo dance in a laboratory as two twins that look like Tweedledee and Tweedledum from Alice Wonderland dance along with him. Like, why not? It's just, it's fun. It's fun to suspend that disbelief and just let yourself enjoy it instead of being like, this would never happen. Like, of course it wouldn't. Gremlins wouldn't happen. And yes, Gremlins is a little bit more grounded. I would say Gremlins is a little bit more grounded, which sounds funny to say about a movie about monsters, but it is. Like, there's a realism to that. And this one is just outright fucking ridiculous, from the skyscraper being fully automated to everything about it. But also, like, that's what makes it fun. But I could also see why people are like, this is not Gremlins. But I think it is still Gremlins. It's chaos, but it's just even more heightened, both literally and figuratively, because, you know, skyscrapers.
Oh, yes. Well, when you make that comparison, I agree that, I mean, Gremlins, I would say that the first Gremlins is 70% horror, 30% comedy, and Gremlins 2 is maybe the opposite. It's 70% comedy, 30% horror.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
I definitely agree with that.
Yes. And well, here's a question for you. I will tell my answer right up front. I think this might be controversial. Personally, I like Gremlins 2 way more. That might be very controversial.
Thank you.
Where do you
I literally just posted, I posted on Twitter last night that I think this is a perfect movie. I think this movie takes what made Gremlins so interesting and just expands on it so much. I think because of the fact that Joe Dante was like, okay, I have
this shit, I'm out.
Right. He's like, I have triple the budget of the original one. And I also have, like, they're not going to have any creative, you know, speaking into what I want to do. And so I think he just like went wild with this one, and the imagination on display, but also a lot of the kind of in jokes that were happening. Like, I died laughing last night when I was watching this with the Leonard Maltin bit, because he famously slandered Gremlins, the original one, as being, you know, horrible. And so then he shows up in this one and he's like holding the Gremlins movie, and then he just gets attacked and destroyed by Gremlins. Is so hilarious to me. And it's so funny because it's very tongue-in-cheek, and the fact that he could be a good enough sport to be like, okay, I can go on this movie and get torn apart from the way I you know, criticize the first movie. I just think that's so much fun, and it's so, I don't know, there's so much more imagination in this film.
It's also very Tingleverse in the sense that a lot of my Tinglers are meta. They are referencing the one before it.
Yeah.
And so I was watching it and I thought, wow, really watching this movie, I wonder if that was kind of a subconscious influence on my writing as well. Of just there are so many fourth wall breaks. Before we go on, Mary Beth, Gremlins 1 or Gremlins 2?
So this is the first time I've seen Gremlins 2. I'm going to be perfectly honest. Okay. You've got me to watch Gremlins 2 for the first time. Thank you so much.
I cannot wait to hear your perspective then, because that must have been
me too.
So dang bizarre.
It's very hard in comparing them to me right now, because they just feel obviously connected, but very different.
Very different.
I loved this though. And I'm really sorry. I don't know if I have an answer for you yet about which, and I might at the end of this, but I think I love how ridiculous it is. Gremlins has a very special place in my heart, as I know it has a very special place in all of our hearts for like what it was. But this one, it's just like, it's one of those things that it's like, okay, you gave a guy a budget, look what he can fucking do with it. And I like, it's really impressive and silly, but like, you have to be impressed by how crazy it is, by the fact that there is an automated wild build. And it's like, the whole thing is wild. And I think I love that like they said, we're going to go for it. And they went for it so hard. Like, okay, I guess we're all just going to have different kinds of gremlins now, and we're going to have more personalities. Like, there's more personalities to the gremlins. And I really like that, because I think we always have Gizmo having his personality, because when Gizmo comes on the screen in this, I almost started crying. I don't know why. I think I'm like not doing great. I'm also getting my period, TMI. I'm a woman. But it was just like, I love his face. They made a character that is so fucking cute and sweet and that you cheer for. And then you have these, like, you have the one with the googly eyes and is cross-eyed, and then you have the one with the sharp teeth. And it's like, there's more personalities to them. You kind of like, okay, we get to know them a little bit more. And then we get the bat gremlin and the spider gremlin and then the titty gremlin. Like, it's all just so insane, but it all works in a way that it shouldn't, but it does. And I think I don't know. I still don't have an answer, because I think they're doing such different things. It's hard for me to compare, but I just love, okay, I'm going to say something here. I wish that Scream had kind of gone like this, Scream 6 had gone this direction. And I know they're very different, but this is another New York movie. But they smartly did almost single location New York movie in a high rise. And it's got, if you've seen the new Dread movie, the remake with Carl Urban, they have like, they're going up levels of a building and there's like boss levels on each one. And I love that progression of going up the skyscraper and containing it, but there's so much going on in that skyscraper. And I wish that Scream 6 had kind of maybe taken a similar route. And again, I love Scream 6, but I think that Joe Dante really plays with that setting in an interesting way. And yes, I know it's only in the skyscraper, but still there's something playing with like heights and all that stuff there. And I just love that.
I didn't, what an astute observation. To think of how many times I've seen this, I never really clocked that classic, we're going to move the horror to New York movie, a long tradition of those, but only basically a single location. That is really, that is interesting. I don't think that's ever been done.
It's so smart. And it's so smart, though. And like, I know the budget was massive, but it still contains everything. And you keep it from I know the bat gremlin flies out and there's that part. But a lot of it is so contained to the skyscraper. So even though it's like in the city and it still feels massive, it is just in one building, really.
Yeah. And I do know that there was some concern when they said bring the Gremlins to New York. They're like, there's no way we could film this in New York at like with the budget that we have. And so the script revision decided to create the skyscraper and focus mostly on there. And it makes sense. And I think it gives us New York, because you think of New York, you think of skyscrapers. And at the time you think of like the leading technology. So of course New York would have this one building where everything is filmed on a cable network, and we have like automated doors and everything. But I love this idea of like, again, I think when you look at like Gremlins is like a perfect small town that is, beset by gremlins. Here we have, but it's like this idea that suburbia could also be horror. And we see that a lot in some of the work in the 80s with like this and Poltergeist, saying, hey, you are going to these safer, and I'm using this in quotations, listeners, safer places, but there are still places of horror. And I think when we look at the future and we think, oh, it'd be really cool to have like a building that talks to you, that welcomes you to the men's room, that has a revolving doors and all this kind of stuff.
Did you wash your hands?
And then and then we have that, and then we see sort of like the way that this, again, just sort of like a twisted small town Americana is twisting this vision of the future in which everything is computerized and automated and everything is wonderful. And so I love that we're kind of still taking that essence of what I think made Gremlins so unique, and we're now expanding it to be what we want from the future.
Oh, yes. There are two things that I want to say to what each of you said. First, to go back to what Mary Beth said about Gizmo. What do you think? I don't want to. I'm making bold statements all over the place. I don't think that Gremlins works without Gizmo being as viscerally cute. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but Gizmo, a safety hazard. You should not have that creature anywhere. Its very existence of Gizmo is honestly kind of unethical. And
Yes.
the reason that it works in these movies is because Gizmo's dang adorable. And you think, well, yeah, you could get him wet and basically everyone could die. In Gremlins 2, the question is, well, we can keep this little creature. It's really cute. But if you get it wet, all of New York City, and honestly, when you think about it, maybe the world will end if these gremlins get out of this building, because then they get wet and make more. And then you go, yeah, but he's pretty dang cute, and he's got a good song.
No, but it fucking is. They get you. It's like, it's the fuzziness. And like, again, it's because he's a practical little creature. And he has like the cute, tiny little toes. It's the ear. It's like, I don't understand how they specifically not genetically, because he's obviously not real, but like engineered this creature to be like the cutest thing I've ever seen. And like, it gives me cute aggression so bad I want to punch something. Like, it's just, especially like the scene where the guy is like fixing the water fountain and he's spraying it out, and Gizmo's like, no, I'm like, save him at all costs.
Gomez Adams is fixing the water fountain. What a cameo.
I thought that person looked familiar, and that makes me feel less insane. But then also when they've got him like in the lab for the first time, when we see him and he's in the cage, and I'm like, not animal testing on Gizmo, anything but Gizmo. And then they have him fucking dance after he drove a race car in the first one. Like, what are you doing to me? Like, what are you trying to do to my heart? Like, you can't not love Gizmo. And I think they did such a good job. Who designed Gizmo? I'm such a bad researcher. I need to look up who designed, like, who did the work.
That's got to be intention. I know when you're at least writing it, you think, well, the audience, anyone actually thinking about this is going to wonder why we're keeping Gizmo around. And you have to have those themes, the dancing, the animal testing. You have to put him through all this grueling stuff. Otherwise, it really doesn't make sense. And I will say, Phoebe Cates, the only one in this movie that has any sense at all.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And says, what the heck are you doing?
She was like, I don't want that fucking thing on our house. Obviously not direct quote, but that's the vibe. It's like, what the fuck, we rent? We're not at home anymore. Get rid of it. And he's like, it's just for the night.
Do you remember last time what happened? And he's like, oh, this is so cute. And she's like, I don't want this in my house, because as you said, Chuck, this having one of these gizmos, these mogwais, is like unethical. It is like the fate of the world in the palms of this little cute animal.
And so I think, now go on. I'm just going to ramble on about how Phoebe Cates is the only one that makes sense. You go. Sorry.
Well, and I also just wanted to point out one of my favorite parts of this movie that's like very small and very funny is when they're talking about the rules of what's going on and like in that control booth, and the guy is like, well, how do time zones work? And I'm like, that's me, because Terry knows this. My ass is always asking stupid questions like, well, how does that work if you do this? And so he's like, well, it's always midnight somewhere. Like, what happens when it time zones? And then a fucking mutated gremlin busts out and gets him.
That's what I love. It's sort of like, shut the fuck up. I'm going to kill you. Just don't ask these questions. Just enjoy the ride. And I love that kind of prank mentality of this film.
Exactly. It's like, fucking, who cares about the question? Don't ask me these dumbass fucking questions. Shut up. Die.
I have an answer for the time zone question, because I thought about the.
Okay.
I tend to, when I write horror, a big pet peeve of mine in horror is when things don't make sense and they're just popping out just to scare. Especially in ghost movies, they do this all the time, where they move into the house and there's an hour and a half of ghosts popping out, and then you just think, well, why do I care about this? All you're going to do is pop out and scare me. You're not accomplishing any goal. We're not closer to anything. And so I tend to, in my own writing and watching, think about the logic of it. And something I think, honestly, the time zone question, if you actually consider what these rules are supposed to be, obviously the water creates more of them. That triggers some sort of biological breeding, procreation response. And then the food part of it triggers some sort of a mutation response. And so because of that, if you actually think about it kind of logically and think of them as just a species of animals, it makes sense that you would need food before mutating and like going into a cocoon because your body would need the energy. And a lot of animals do have an internal biological clock. That's why some animals are nocturnal or only hunt at dusk and dawn. So my take, maybe another controversial one about the rules, I think that if you change time zones, it wouldn't matter. And I also don't think midnight matters. I think that late at night matters. And they just say midnight because it's easier. And that it is saying you cannot feed this creature because it will enter its cocoon mutation state if it is in a nocturnal period, which is just part of its body.
Gotcha.
I think that if there was a certain gremlin that ate a bunch of food in the middle of the day, it might trigger that state anyway. I think that the midnight is not like a magic thing where on the clock it turns to 12 and it changes. I think it's a biological, when the night comes based on their internal clock, they know that it will be safe to enter a cocoon state and mutate where they won't be harmed. That is my crazy logical version of what is happening.
Hey, I like it, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean,
that makes a lot of sense.
Answers everything.
But it's not as catchy as
it really
midnight.
does.
Yeah, exactly. It also doesn't explain how a bat gremlin can fly through a wall and make a perfect Batman symbol. So my logic is so funny.
You know what? Logic, we talked about this. Logic for this movie is out the fucking window. But I like that, though. That does make a lot of sense that, feeding after midnight, feeding at night.
I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I had the question for you that has been rolling around in my brain because you're talking about the tower. Do you think, and I think pretty strongly, it seems kind of obvious, but kind of not, this is about Trump. Is it right?
Absolutely. It is. Yes, it is about, this is about Trump. And I actually was like, I was Googling it. I was like, is this?
It's gotta be.
It has to be. And so there is an article from Wired that was published in 2016 where they had sat down and talked with Dante. And he was talking about how he needed a bad guy. It was the late 80s. And he was trying to figure out who would be the bad guy of this movie. And so he was like, he was talking about at that time in New York City, there was one major character who was Mr. Billion, Donald Trump. And so they basically kind of put that with like a nod to Ted Turner with the building and the owning the cable network and all that kind of stuff. They took that and added to it. But yes, their idea was at the time Trump was considered quote unquote overbearing and obviously kind of goofy. He was an emblem of what was going on in the 80s and 90s with greed and money and crassness and the idea of the whole world being for sale. But he seemed sort of harmless is what they were talking about back then. And then they're like, who would know that this buffoon would become the president of the United States? Like that was the basic gist I was getting from their interview. They just could not believe it.
It is interesting how the way so it's Daniel Clamp in the
yes, and with his scary ass teeth. Good Lord, the teeth.
Yeah, well, yes, he's smiling a lot, which is like the reason.
As a very toothy.
The reason that I wasn't. I mean, I was pretty sure it was Trump just because of Clamp. When you look at it, the MP at the end, it's 5 letters. They use the Trump font everywhere, and he's his job and all that. But when you actually get down to his personality, kind of nothing like Trump at all, which is why I think it actually bears asking is that not only is he, it's funny, that interview you just said, I almost take issue with the perspective of Joe Dante because he is definitely not the villain in a pretty surprising way. It's setting him up to be the villain, and he kind of just joins the team and is a hero. And I have kind of 2 big issues with it. I love Gremlins 2. I have 2 big flaws in this, and I would say one of the biggest ones is the ending. Is essentially Billy selling out his hometown in a really everyone's cheering that then Trump is going to model some new development after his hometown, and then they're going to pay some extra money. It was just such a bizarre
capitalistic
ending, and so really the Trump character is kind of seen as the ultimate hero of this.
I'm glad you bring that up, because there was this other part of the interview where the initial creation of the Clamp character was more villainous. And when they hired, what's his name? I know his last name is Glover, John Glover, to be him, he's just so goofy. The quote was something about how, let me see if I can find it. It changed a bit. The final big screen incarnation of Clamp is likely rah, because largely due to the performance of Glover, who Dante said was so likable and boyish and gee whiz, he started to become sympathetic. And so from his perspective, it started out a little bit more villainous, but because of how likable John Glover is, it sort of eased those edges. And I'm a little sad that it did, because it is very much rah capitalism. Let's take your hometown and market it and become like, it has a very icky feeling. I agree with you there 100%.
Yeah, that is.
But I love the Gremlins, and here's the diversity of the Gremlins here. And the thing is, I saw this in the movie theater. This was one of my earliest memories of seeing a movie in the movie theater. I would have been 9 at the time when this came out, 9-ish. And I remember sitting in the movie theater, and I remember getting panicked because there's one moment, and it has nothing to do with Gremlins, but there's a moment where I think they call him Daffy, the kind of googly-eyed gremlin character that is like that they take home on accident, that Kate takes home on accident. When she is holding him and he is like going crazy as they're trying to put him in the box, and he's like making all these weird noises and stuff, it reminded me so much of a similar scene in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, when the evil guy is dying and he is melting into a puddle and going, and that moment in Roger Rabbit terrified me as a kid when I first saw it. And so seeing this and hearing that sound, as weird as it is, it brought me back. And I didn't even think about it until last night as I was watching it. And I was like, oh my God, that is the sound of the guy dying in Roger Rabbit. I had a very visceral response to it.
That is I can't believe you have brought this up, because when I was doing my soul searching about my influence of this artistically on me, the only other thing I could compare it to for me that was one of my favorite films was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I will say that there is, to bring it back to what this whole dang podcast is about, as I said, there was only one moment in this movie that scared me, and only one moment in Who Framed Roger Rabbit that scared me. And both of them have a very similar thing of very strangely serious moment in the middle of this fun movie. They're so similar in some ways. I brought this up at the beginning. I would bet, I didn't listen to it, someone has been on this podcast that did Gremlins 1, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I am guessing that it is the same moment that scared them. May I make my guess?
Absolutely.
It's got to be the Santa Claus monologue from Gremlins 1. Because that's what it was for me.
I'm trying to remember.
I don't think that was the one, but we talked about it extensively.
We talked about that
and how fucking
lot.
Dark it is, and how dark that movie is, like more than you would think.
And they parody it in Gremlins 2.
They do.
It's just so strange. It is the weirdest
thing. I was laughing so hard when she's trying to, it is the weirdest thing. And she's trying to she's like, oh God, this unlocked a memory. And it's like, how many horrible memories do you have attached to like specific events? Because she's like going down that route again. And I started laughing because it is definitely the moment in the first Gremlins where it's just out of nowhere. And she's talking about her dad dying because he was Santa Claus. And she's going down this, he's like, oh no, let's not go down that route. And it's again, another moment where I'm like, Joe Dante is just sort of like, flicking his teeth at people and saying, I'm making a big joke here. And I love that. When I
saw that, now I understood it as a parody of the first one. When I saw it, I thought, this makes me feel weird. And so the thing that scared me In the first Gremlins, it was the Santa Claus monologue, and in this one, it is the Abe Lincoln's birthday monologue. Is actually what day she's talking about, and
yeah, it is.
It is funny. Also, I will say, I feel like the sensibilities would change. You can barely hear it, but in a very actually serious note, I didn't realize when I was younger either, because I kind of just felt the tone of it, that she's actually talking about not a sexual assault, but like I guess maybe she's talking about a flasher when she's like a little girl.
Yes.
And it colors the scene of the flasher. There's a flasher gremlin that she really freaks out about. And it's kind of played for laughs. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you have this parody scene where you can barely hear it, but you're like, oh, there's a strange sort of, there's just something very deeply serious about this in this movie that's basically a cartoon otherwise. And like I said, I didn't understand it at the time, and it just always kind of freaked me out. And to go back to your Roger Rabbit, there is that moment in Who Framed Roger Rabbit where suddenly I'm thinking, I thought this was a dang cartoon. What the heck is going on here?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the show movies and stuff that can do that can be one thing and then for a brief moment turn to something a little bit meaner and kind of skewer you and then go back to being funny is sometimes more traumatizing than a movie that you're going in knowing that you're going to be getting something, super scary or a moment that is super real because you don't expect it in here. I mean, this starts off with the Looney Tunes, right? With Bugs Bunny riding on the Warner Brothers shield. And then this whole like interaction with him and Daffy, which was actually longer, and they ended up cutting it down. Like it goes into Daffy coming up with different subtitles for the movie and all this different stuff that they just kind of cut because people were like, why is this animation going on for so long? But I love that is like our intro. And then also Daffy is sort of at the very end during the credits. I just love that is the setting of this. And we get this very Looney Tunes-esque take on the Gremlins. And then in the middle of it, it just, as you said, Chuck, just sort of like skewers you with this one moment. You're just like, ooh, what is happening here?
Can I ask too, do you remember when I watched this, I was kind of confused. Maybe this is a dream. I remember the middle part being more cartoon. I remember maybe I had a dream, but I remember maybe Elmer Fudd or someone saying that they're hunting gremlins. And then the gremlins come out and do the shadow thing in the midway break when the film breaks.
So I wonder if the one that I watched last night was the one in the theaters with Hulk Hogan and all that kind of stuff. But apparently for the VHS release and the DVD release, they changed it into more like your DVD or your VHS is screwing up. They actually filmed a different sequence for that so that it would joke you while you're watching it from home. And so maybe that was part of that because I know
the VHS version, and in that you get a sort of a tracking error with fuzz. And the gremlins kind of run around in front of that. And then I really think it goes very quickly to a cartoon where Elmer Fudd says, I'm hunting
I wouldn't be surprised.
Or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Because now that you're saying that, I'm also having this memory of that as a kid because I would have seen this once in the movie theater, and then I wore the tape out a whole lot when I was a kid. So that does, now that you're saying that, because this was the first time I'd watched this movie since I was a little kid for sure. And so there was a lot of it that I was like, is this movie going to stand up to my memories of watching it? And boy, it definitely did.
It is.
Well, on that note, do we want to start wrapping up and give this our rating out of 5?
Sounds good.
All right. Can I change our rating?
We didn't even talk about Marla.
Can I change our rating out of 5?
Yeah.
Because I want to change it to how many surprise Looney Tunes moments out of 5 do you give Gremlins to?
Yes. Should we do a quick just discussion at least about Marla? What a strange... The fact that they go to a Canadian food restaurant.
A Canadian restaurant? And he's asking to like serve a horn, an antler for like a moose?
Like incredible. And I love Marla's character. I love her having giant red hair and a weird accent. I love a character with big curly red hair. And I feel like it's always this character. I don't know why women with big curly hair are typecast as like the bitchy boss, but like Marla's voice is very, I don't know. Everything about her is also very.
Her accent is constantly changing.
I love her. And again, the New York vibes with Marla. I just feel like there's always that like very like type A, go, go, go woman with like artsy looks and has that funny light, has like the big ass lighter and is always stressed out. Like she is that character to a T and is also, again, changing accents. It's very strange, but I love her.
The typecast that you were talking about, when watching it last night, to bring it back to Frame Roger Rabbit, that came out in what, 80?
Reminded
me. I think Roger Rabbit 88. So that 88. Was in everyone's minds when they were filming Gremlins 2. She really, Marla really just seems like Jessica Rabbit is kind of what they're trying to do.
She does.
And I did like that she was like an executive rather than the secretary, because, you know, again, those characters are usually like the secretary, but she's the boss. Yes. And we do play into like the hot boss kind of thing with like, but again, love these characters. Weird, wacky, but they just really add a lot to this movie.
One final thing about Marla too, they said that apparently in the 90s, Trump ended up having an affair with a Marla Maples. And so they had asked them, was this like, and she's like, no, she was named Marla for no reason whatsoever. It was a nutty coincidence.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, there's a lot of...
Right.
There might have been, you know, sometimes with names, you have a year where you can look up how many dang Marlas. That's not a common name now, but they're in that generation of the 80s, maybe there were a whole parade of Marlas coming through. Could be it, but I don't know really.
Hell yeah. All right. So let's wrap up and give this a rating out of 5. Terry, you're up first. How many surprise Looney Tunes cartoons out of 5 do you give Gremlins to?
As I was kind of saying, I didn't know what to expect when I was rewatching this, because this was a favorite of mine as a kid, and I have not seen it in probably, 30 years, I would say. Wow. It's been a very, very long time. I love this movie so much. I do think it's better than Gremlins because I think it takes what made Gremlins so interesting and just explodes it in so many different ways. I think the Gremlins themselves have so much more personality, from the Greta, the woman gremlin, to like the lightning one, to the body horror of the one gremlin growing vegetables on his face. Like, this is baby's first body horror in some ways.
The effects are so good in this movie.
They are. And I also think that this movie kind of shows the importance of practical effects, because there are times where it's definitely like superimposed images. I don't know if they use like rotoscoping or what they did for some of the animated sequences, but like you can definitely tell a difference between the kind of more computer generated ones and the practical effects. And this just shows you how reacting to Gremlins as a physical thing is just so much better than just pure, computer generated creatures. And I don't know. I love this movie. I think it's funny. I think there's some moments in it that are scary. I think that I love the kind of homage to the horror genre with Fred, the Dracula. We didn't even get to talk about him. Just sort of like all of these little things that were a celebration of horror. I think this is one of Dante's best films, and I love it so freaking much. So for me, it's 5 surprise Looney Tune moments. What about you, Mary Beth?
Okay, so I think I'm going with 4.5. I'm going with 4.5.
Okay.
I'm so stuck on what to do because they're so different. I keep like waffling and it's such like a non-answer, but I love how creative it is. And honestly, I want more fuck you movies from directors, because if this is a fuck you movie, it's a real good fuck you. And yeah, I know it didn't do great when it first came out and it's gotten a cult following now, but man, oh man, I love a good fuck you. And I just love that he said, all right, cool, we're going to make the wildest shit, but also really fun. Practical effects everywhere. Gremlins growing out of backs and popping out of backs like Suriname frogs, and just people getting attacked left, right, and center. And yeah, it's a fuck you, but it's also a really impressive look at how to expand scope and how to expand scope and limit it at the same time, which I think is so cool to see how that's done. And I think it's just so fun. And Christopher Lee is in this as a doctor.
So good.
And
Dr. Catheter, by the way.
Like, it's just so not serious. And I so deeply respect that, how unserious it is. And I love that a lot. So, Chuck, you have the final word. How many surprise Looney Tune cartoons out of 5 do you give Gremlins 2?
Wow. Okay, this might be surprising. I wish I knew, because this is my choice. And I actually think, so if you would have asked me, young buckaroo, this was maybe my dang favorite for a while, for a couple of dang years there.
Mm-hmm.
Upon rewatch, there were, I said 2 earlier, there were 3 things about it that stood out to me. I was like, I don't like that as much anymore. I don't know how often this happens that you both rate a movie higher than the guest who picked it. I'm going to give it, I still love it, but I'm going to give it 4 surprise Looney Tunes out of 5. I'm going to take off 1 point just for my issues. The first one is that the moral of the story is, it is so, the Daniel Clamp buying Billy's home, like the rights to the design of Billy's hometown. And then there's this thing where Phoebe takes it. Is it Kate? Is her character named Kate? Mm-hmm. Yes. Kate says, oh, well, that'll cost you. And then he's like, well, we'll pay whatever you can. Like, there's, not only do they sell it, but the whole point of it is we're really going to make a lot of money from this. So that I thought was strange. Number 2, in going back, I tend to think of things, like I said, in screenplay. There's this book that is kind of made fun of in some ways, but I think is very helpful in screenplay writing, called Saves the Cat. And there's something in that called the fun and games segment of the script. The fun and games in this film is, I'm going to say, a little bit too long, where there's a big middle section that when I was a kid, I was like, put this on for 3 dang hours. Show me, let's come up with let's do an ice gremlin. Where's the fire gremlin? But
right.
But rewatching it, at a certain point, I thought, there is literally nothing happening. Plot-wise, it is a stack of scenes for about 45 minutes to an hour, right in the middle, that has no plot at ever. And the main reason I don't like that is because Gizmo is completely forgotten about that entire time. Yeah, the whole middle of the movie, Gizmo is just being tortured, which is kind of strange. Makes his redemption a little better. It sounds like I hated it, but I love this movie still. I don't want to bring it down too much, but for those 2 things, I'm going to take off half a star, and I'm going to give it a total of 4.5 or 2.5 stars off for each of my issues. 4 out of 5 surprise Looney Tunes, and I'm maybe now it's tied with the original Gremlin. I got to rewatch the original one. Maybe I'm actually tied with them now. My whole life, Gremlins 2 has been better, but part of me, I was kind of wishing for a little more plot momentum and a little bit more, like that scene in Gremlins 1 when the Mohawk Gremlin is in the kitchen by the microwave. That is terrifying.
It is, absolutely.
So I just kind of was wishing by the end of it, I thought, give me just one of those. I don't know. So I'm 4 out of 5.
Gotcha.
Hell yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah. So thank you so much, Chuck, for joining us to talk about Gremlins 2. Where can our listeners find you, and what do you have coming up that you can share and talk about?
I am on basically every social media as either at Chuck Tingle, at real Chuck Tingle on TikTok, at Dr. Chuck Tingle on Tumblr. I used to just say Twitter, but I think that it's probably, who knows if it will even exist by the time this comes out. So you can find me there. And I would say if you like the things I have said and enjoy my way, get to Camp Damascus, which is, I guess, out tomorrow when this airs.
Yep. So
that will be great. And we can support queer, neurodivergent horror.
Fuck yeah. That's what we're all about here on Scarred for Life. So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with Gremlins 2? Do you have a favorite between Gremlins 2 and Gremlins? Let us know by sending us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please stay safe out there. Most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
When you want to have fun and have scratchers to scratch, there's a playful way you can do just that. Scratch with the key or acrylic nail. Scratch with the quill from a porcupine tail. Use a belt buckle from your friend Lamar. Or scratch with your pick while you play guitar. You can scratch in a bunch of different playful ways. Scratchers from the California Lottery. A little play can make your day.
Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase, play, or claim.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is the Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.